in South Africa, we've now had enough of these extreme events that when you say the floods in KwaZulu-Natal, you need to say which one. It's no longer just referring to the floods and everyone know which one it is. And there's similar events in the rest of the world. There's now a global organization called the World Weather Attribution Center that on a weekly basis looks at international extreme weather events and then runs the analysis to say how likely these events, how more likely these events have been due to climate change or not. And there's a fledgling shall we say, a fledgling group of activists using this information and responding with quite novel ways of climate litigation. And this is just one pathway, one response to these extreme events and the whole loss and damages discussion. I'm interested to hear how would industry or how will the private sector respond to infrastructure losses triggered by climate? How do maybe, again, Tanya, financial institutions, maybe with large infrastructure assets, how will they navigate this complexity?
Yeah. So I think first, before I go into that, when you're putting together an agenda for an event, and when you were doing it for this one, Barend, you got all your questions and your topics, and obviously you're going to try and put the most important ones up front or in the middle because you want to make sure you get to them. But the things that you might not have time for, you put it, and might not get to, you put at the end. Mm-hmm. Well, where was loss and damage at COP27? It was negotiated in the last few days. And for me, that's one of the biggest issues. They need to bring that up front as part of the broader discussions. The second week is a lot around the finances. So I guess that's why it gets slipped in there. But I can tell you, after only being there for 3 days, I was exhausted. I don't know how those poor people carry on negotiating through the night. Loss and damage in general, I'm really interested to hear what Steve is going to say in terms of, some of the funding that was promised in the last 2 years, but in particular last year. I think there's a lot of mistrust because that $100 billion 14 years ago, and where is it? We're struggling to see that the promises made are then enacted on. And I think it comes back to, that commitment first, then it's action, then it's implementation, and then there's got to be some kind of monitoring. And we seem to be falling apart somewhere between the commitment, might be a little bit of action, but there's very little on the implementation or the monitoring. I think from a financial services perspective, we've been talking about this for years. There are so many ways that the financial sector can bring funds to the table. So this doesn't just have to be, the big Scandinavian countries who are taking it the most seriously and, coming along with their donations. There's the ability through blended finance models to really de-risk some of these projects. They need to be scalable, and that's one of the issues and reasons why it hasn't been done so easily. It needs to be scalable. But once they're scalable, you bring in the multilateral development banks, and they help de-risk. They put up some of that first capital, and then you can bring in the likes of your retail banks, etc. We're just not seeing enough of that happen.
Mm-hmm. The question is whether a few additional disasters, I'm thinking we all know how the motor manufacturing company Toyota was affected with one of the KZN flood disasters. And there's other examples. And at which point do these things happen often enough that you have someone, financial institution or other industry with a large investment in, let's say, infrastructure, that then starts thinking a little bit proactively and say, next time we have a SA Weather Service warning and say there's a high likelihood of a cut-off low weather system over the Western Cape, and it's likely to dump large amounts of rain in a short period of time. At which point do companies or do industries take that into account and say, I need to do something. I need to have larger stormwater drains. I need to, whatever mitigation efforts or risk management efforts their infrastructure requires. When do we get to that particular point? Joel, do you have an idea?
That's quite a tricky question, but my experience of debating the issues of strategy with companies down in Durban 6 months after the floods was to ask what they had identified in the companies that these were master's level students. What were their companies? What was their response? And I would say the one that stuck in my mind is that we should have moved to Hammersdale faster, and we should think very carefully about where we locate our new warehouse or whatever. It wasn't necessarily that they were expecting the infrastructure, the the sanitation reticulation systems to be upgraded, probably patched up. So it wasn't, where are they going to do that? It was really, well, maybe near in the low-lying area around Isipingo and the harbour. That's not the best place for us to have our operations. And those were the conversations that were taking place. So I think that actually indicates that, there's a business as usual which says, well, we'll just get back to how it was after we fix it all up. And then there's the other approach to say, well, isn't there fundamentally a shift in what we're doing and where we're doing it and how we're doing it, and how does that affect the way that we produce our product? How does that affect the people that we employ? And those are longer term questions. And the fact that there's a lot of issues around infrastructure, whether it's reticulation systems or whether it's just the transport of getting the people that you employ to your place of work, which is not so great up here in Gauteng for many people. Those actually are not the kind of questions that you can kick down the road. Mm-hmm. And so I think it does require thinking more systemically. Mm-hmm. It requires understanding complex social systems, which we tend to prefer complicated things that we can design using technology. And we're very good at that, but that's no good if you're not thinking about the implications on society and people's lives. And it also needs longer term thinking and futures thinking to say, yeah, we're talking about 10 years now, but this is not new. This is 60, 70 years in terms of the scientists talking about climate. And we are now in a much shorter time frame. But all of those things mean that it's not what should business do, what should national governments do, it's what should they be doing together with other countries, other organizations. Guy's example of the 100 global companies that are a leverage point for taking action. I read about that a number of years ago, and they're probably still much the same 100 companies. Where is the leverage point to shift that needle? Where is the action that can actually start to make it more than just a risk analysis on the board report? But it actually can be, this is our contribution to our country. This is our contribution to society. I've got lots of questions because I think we, rather than answers, but I think it's questions that might trigger a better focus on the actions that need to take. I don't think risk management is the whole story. You've got the story of adaptation, and I think you've got other questions on that, because I think it's thinking that we've done enough thinking about mitigation and risk management and how do we contain the problem. The answer lies on the other side of the equation, building resilience so that we can, and I'm talking we as being corporate business, how can corporate business within the conditions of our national and our global commitments and ambitions, how can we move more strongly into the future by adapting and innovating? Because adaptation is also only another step in the process. Where do we actually move into innovation beyond adaptation, where we're innovating a new way of doing business, a new way of providing products and services to society? Now that's more the 2050 agenda. Yeah,
that's the notion of partnerships and systemic responses.
Absolutely.
And the context of adaptation, we'll definitely get back to it. Today, I'm interested in your view on loss and damages from extreme events. We've now talked about the South African context. We've had a few floods and extreme events in the recent past. But I think whether it's El Nino or other extreme events, I think there's large parts of the Middle East that have had excessive heat waves recently with large numbers of human casualties. So it's not as if you are exempt from these extreme events. And I'm interested in your experience about the links between these extreme events and how that might shape discussions around loss and damages.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think the issue is that we can't shy away from the fact that the effects of climate change is definitely prevalent now, across the globe, not just in the Middle East, not just in Africa, but in all major parts of the world, and understanding that the consequences of the El Nino effect that will be coming soon, and in terms of, for example, here in the UAE, we had a very very extreme summer over the past few months, and it's only now that the weather is starting to kind of cool down a little bit, which is not the norm, let's say, over the past decade or so. I think the fact that we are actually understanding the consequences of what is going on, and how, especially in Egypt last year, that parties did agree to set up a structure in which we will be addressing loss and damage within the context of COP, and within the context of the multilateral system. I think that is a testament to how important this subject is right now. And as the incoming presidency, we are taking this very seriously. We want to set up a fund that does address these risks and these disaster events. And I think it's a good start, for us to acknowledge the situation, and for us to really start to think about how we can tackle these events collectively.